Hey guys, how's it going? It's Al, week 16, the Lineup Builder Show. I'm going to spend the next 45 minutes to an hour talking with my chat here on twitch.tv, taking their questions to kind of see what they are looking for this week. Questions that they have in terms of lineup building, in terms of strategy, game selection, anything that they want to talk about, we end up talking about every single Friday. Obviously, the content that I've put out this week is all out there. Unfortunately, I was sick on Thursday and was not able to partake in the 06010 podcast at ESPN and was not able to partake in the DFS Edge podcast. Definitely go listen to those. Great information. I just wasn't on them because I was sick as a dog yesterday and basically just racked up with 102 fever. But I feel much better today. So I'm happy to be back online and streaming for you guys and putting this video up on YouTube. If you'd be so kind, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, make sure you ring that notifications bell because we got some more weeks coming. Just because your fantasy league is over doesn't mean that DFS stops. We go all the way through the playoffs and I come out with a bunch of videos every single week. So please make sure you ring that notifications bell. You guys have been amazing this year in terms of the support. I also stream 6 days a week. Down below in the comments, just click that, show more. You can find a link. We are getting close to 10,000 followers on Twitch TV. I've been streaming now. I've had a sub button on Twitch for what, 30 months now? It's insane how fast the time has flown in that aspect. So getting close to 10,000 followers. If you'd be so kind, if you have those 2 extra clicks in you, jump over to twitch.tv, drop a follow on the channel. Let's see if we can get to 10,000 before the football season is over. And let's talk to the chat and see what they have to say. Let's bring them in here. Spamming my smile emote. You guys are the worst. You're also the best, but the worst. What is the best low cost cash quarterback plays? There's a lot. I mean, I think that because of the value that's opened up, we have a lot of opportunity at quarterback. Okay. So because of the value that's opened up, and the value that I'm talking about is at running back, right? So the value I'm talking about is A here. He's too cheap. We already had pretty good value this week at running back where you could get guys that projected to get 18 to 25 touches for 5,500 to 7K. There were at least 2 or 3 of those guys, and in good matchups against teams that struggle to stop opposing running backs, all those sorts of things. You were going to get that sort of a volume out of those guys. Now you have somebody like Washington, because Jacobs is out, sitting at 4,000. DraftKings did not price him up and did not assume that Jacob was going to be out. So they dropped the price on Washington from 4,700 down to 4,000 this week. And then after the pricing was out, somewhere around Wednesday afternoon, Washington all of a sudden became a massive play because of the fact that Jacobs was out. Now, DraftKings this year has done a really good job about pricing up backups, usually in the 4,500 range. But considering that Washington in week 14 had 21 points when he was the starter, and they priced him up from 3,000 that week, which, you know, that came after lock. They were the afternoon game, or the 4 p.m. Eastern game were the Raiders, and that news didn't come out until 90 minutes before that Jacob was going to be out that week. He was really low owned. In fact, he was less owned than Jalen Richard. And then Washington became the guy. It puts up 21.5 DraftKings points. The next week, they price him up to 4,700, partially because of the fact that if Jacobs sat again, they didn't want him to be a free square like he would have been if we knew about Jacobs in week 14. I think they should have left him there. Maybe it was priced up a little bit more aggressively because of the matchup with Jacksonville, who has been really bad against opposing running backs for the past month and a half. But I think it's entirely possible that this drop is a problem. I would have rather him been at 4,500 or 4,700. Still would have been a great value play, and everybody still would have played him, but it would have cost a little bit more at 4,000. I think he's going to be the highest owned guy in cash and maybe the highest owned tournament player on the slate, which allows us to pay for quarterbacks if you want. I don't think that you need to. I think there's a few cheap quarterbacks that we're going to see some ownership on, but not massive ownership on, as I said, because of the value. Will Greer has not started a game. This is his first one. He's got tremendous weapons surrounding him with Samuel and DJ Moore and the tight ends that they have and Christian McCaffrey. So we've seen Kyle Allen have some good games this year. He's only 4,300. If you can get 15 plus points out of Will Greer, if that allows you to get an extra superstar or off of a player that you didn't like and up to a player that you absolutely love, I get it. Don't expect a massive ceiling game. I'm not looking for 25 points out of Will Grier. I'm not even looking for 20 points out of Will Grier in the lineups that I'm playing him. If you can get, like I said, 15 to 20 out of him, you're really in the driver's seat and putting yourself in position to get a ceiling game out of the other players that you can afford. So if you're rostering Will Grier, it's not because you want Will Grier. You're rostering Will Grier in tournaments because of what else he opens up for you. A couple of other cheaper plays. Again, everything down at the cheap range is going to make you vomit a little bit in your mouth. So like Andy Dalton is going to kind of, you're going to, there's nothing really you can do about it. But the matchup with Miami is one that we've wanted to stream against pretty much every single week, especially with quarterbacks. I get it. If you think that he's going to throw for a couple of touchdowns, you don't really have to get much out of him. If you're going to get 16 to 22 DraftKings points, if you get 20 out of Dalton, all of a sudden you're at 4x his salary, and it doesn't take all that much to get there, to get a 20-point game out of somebody. Like 321 and 1 touchdown is 21 points, right? 19 DraftKings points, 2 touchdowns, 262. It's not a massive day, right? So you're not looking for all that much out of a 5,000 quarterback. You just have to have a path to it, and the matchup with Miami has produced that more often than not. If you think that Baker Mayfield can get there, fine. At 5,400, same sort of situation. Drew Lock might be lower owned than most and faces off against Detroit, who has not been able to stop anybody. Gave up over 300 yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns last week in the first half to Jameis Winston. Drew Lock looked excellent against Houston, looked bad against Kansas City in Kansas City, but traveling to Kansas City can definitely make quarterbacks look very bad. He has good athletes with great matchups in this game, like Cortland Sutton. Deshaun Hamilton is solid. Noah Fant is very good. Lindsey is great in the passing game as well as on the ground. This offense should not struggle to move the ball this week like they did against Kansas City. And again, if he can get you to 20 points, you're doing great. Phillip Rivers against Oakland. Oakland has not done a great job at stopping opposing quarterbacks. You're going to need 20 plus out of him. The problem is, how many times has he gotten there this year? He got there a lot early in the year when Austin Eckler was the primary back. Right? And Austin Eckler's usage has been great. Even with Melvin Gordon back, his usage in the passing game has been great. But they've really changed. This offense has really changed a lot recently, to the point where Melvin Gordon's back and they're just pounding the ball on the ground with him. The Raiders should do a better job of stopping them from doing that. I could see Phillip Rivers throwing for 2 or 3 touchdowns in this game. Not 100% of the time, obviously, but there are many paths to 2+ touchdowns for Phillip Rivers if you played this game a million times. So Rivers at 5,700 is another play that's sub 6K that I think is pretty solid. Did we already do Saturday? I have a video up on YouTube for both the Saturday slate and the Sunday slate. If you guys want to ask me Saturday questions, we can talk about Saturday questions as well, whatever you'd like. I usually try to stick to main slate, but if there's something that's Saturday that's really, really important, if you want to keep it to maybe a strategy question, we could talk about it that way. But no, not your bad at all, Mike. How do I go about building player pools, and what ownership do I allow on a short slate like Saturday? Okay, so individual ownership obviously goes up, right? So for a player on a main slate, I tend to stick to a smaller player pool on main slates than most people do. I've spoken about this before. I'm not trying to like turn a profit in a tournament if I play 150 lineups. And I know that people are going to clutch their pearls. What do you mean you're not trying to like turn a profit? Because like if I have 150 lineups in the slant for $1,350, or if I have 150 lineups in the Millionaire Maker at $3,000, making $3,200 is not the goal. Making $1,400 total on a $1,350 investment is not the goal. It's better than losing. It sure is. I agree with you. But I'm taking shots. I want to finish in first. All the money is in the top 5 spots in a tournament. You got to come in top 3. You got to come in top 5. In order to do that, you got to take a few different shots. I'm not saying that you have to have, 6 players that are less than 0.5% owned to get there, but you're taking different sort of shots to get there. So on a main slate, my player pool in a 11 to a 13 game slate, my player pool typically sits between, let's say, 55 and 65 players total. The majority of that comes from quarterback stacks and bringbacks. So when I say a quarterback stack and a bringback, let's go here. Use the first game on the slate. So if I have Matt Ryan, I'm probably also going to have lineups that are going to, using the daily roto lineup builder, I'm going to have Matt Ryan, and I'm probably going to have at least one of his pass catchers in a group. So it's going to build lineups like this, or any of his pass catchers, right? It's going to cycle through one or two of his pass catchers in those groups. I'm also going to have a bring back group, meaning that every lineup that has Matt Ryan at quarterback is going to have usually exactly one, sometimes at least one of all the players that I think are viable on this team. So I might have Conley in this lineup as well, right? So I might have at wide receiver, I might have Conley in this lineup as well. So I'm going to have differentiated ownership through my stacks and bringbacks. The rest of my plays, I try to identify what my core is, right? I've already talked about Washington. If you guys have read Best Buys, you kind of have a feel for the players that I'm zeroing in on this week. And those are usually the best plays on the week. The guys that I feel are the best plays on the week, whether it's from a matchup point of view, a volume perspective, or some combination of both, points per dollar, whatever. Players that I think can get me access to outperforming their salary. And those players are going to be cycled through in the projections. And I want to overweight the field on all of those players. And if you don't understand what overweight the field means, it means that if the field has 15% of somebody, I want to have 25 to 40% of that player. So I'm going to overweight the field on my entire core. I'm going to get my differentiation through all of these players that are in my quarterback and bring back stacks. And then my core is going to be cycled through. So I'll probably have my 3 of my running backs that I have favored in this. Probably one of my top wide receivers is going to be in this as well. And then one of the 4 or 5 defenses that I play. Now, in terms of the Saturday slate, we're going to do the same thing, right? So how does my player pool change? I'm still going to have my core of players that I think are the best point per dollar guys. And on this Saturday slate, it's very tough because there aren't as many great popping values. Last week on the main slate on Sunday for week 15, everybody was great value, and we said that the scores were going to go way up because there were so many players in great spots that don't have that project to present a profit on their salary on the week. And it happened that way, and the scores definitely went up. Because this slate, though, because that's just the way it goes, on this slate on Saturday, not as much value. DraftKings has tightened Saturday up a ton, which has made it tougher. You're going to have some spots in this lineup that you're not really comfortable with, especially with their salaries. And so I'm still going to build the same groups, right? I'm still going to do the same thing where, like, I'm going to have Watson. I'm going to have 1 or 2 of his pass catchers, right? I'm going to have him, and then I'm probably going to have one of his other pass catchers, maybe Fuller or whatever. And then I'm going to bring it back. I'm going to build a group that says if Watson is the quarterback, I'm going to put in all the viable wide receivers and tight ends from that group, right? And so I'm probably going to have one of them. You might have Perriman, you might have Watson, you might have OJ Howard in that group. And then I'm going to cycle through all my core players from here. So my core players, while I'm probably going to have a max somewhere around 35 to 50% of any player on a main slate, that ownership level on the Sunday slate or the Saturday slate on a short slate this week, like Thanksgiving, is going to go up. So instead of 30 to 50% for my favored guys, I'm probably going to have 45 to 65% of my favored guys. My core players. And then I tend to play 8 to 10 quarterbacks on a week on a main slate. I don't try to play all of the quarterbacks that are playing. I'm not going to have shares of every quarterback. I'm not trying to cover every base. I want the games that I think the quarterbacks and their stacks have a massive path to a 3+ touchdown game. And I usually think there's maybe 7 to 10 of those guys on a week that could score me 25 points or more as a quarterback. There's only 6 quarterbacks on this slate. So I can't have 10 to 12% of my 7 to 10 quarterbacks. So I'm going to have more ownership on the quarterbacks that I like the most here. And so everybody's ownership on a short slate is going to go up, just like in every other sport. There's less players to go around. Ownership on all the players goes up. Obviously, my player pool will probably go down, though. So instead of having 55 to 65 players, I might have 40 to 55 players on my Saturday slate. I hope that helped answer that question. Thoughts on Higbee now that Everett's playing? I'm projecting a little bit here. I think Everett has done well enough in the last few weeks, the last 3 weeks. I believe I saw a stat that said something like he's the first tight end to have 3 straight 100-yard receiving games in like 10 years. He's been outstanding. He's gotten a lot of red zone usage. He's gotten a couple of end zone targets in there as well, which are extremely valuable for us. We talked about this before we started the recording about how valuable inside the 5 carries and end zone targets are to converting those into touchdowns. But he's been the safety valve. And I don't know how much Everett's going to play in this game, right? No designation. Are we going to immediately assume that Higbee, they're just going to say, thank you for your service, and now you are the backup tight end again? Are they going to say, you know what? This is a merit-based promotion, and you're going to still be our number 1 pass-catching guy when we go to tight end, which is something they've done a lot more this season. I personally don't think Gerald Everett's going to play a completely full snap count this weekend. And I might be wrong. Right? I definitely think it hurts Higbee in terms of his volume of targets, in terms of his volume of snaps. I think that where they're priced, I think it kind of hurts both of them. Where it's great for the Rams on the field. It gives them more options from a real life point of view or perspective like that. But it's tough to pay $5K outside of a tournament for somebody like Higbee, where before, without Everett, he becomes a cash game play at $5K, or at least cash game viable. I think you now have to take a leap of faith with Tyler Higbee, where you didn't have to take that before. McVay said he'd work him in slow. Okay, but if you guys have seen my Twitter for the last year, I'll give you the personification of it. I don't trust Sean McVay. Never. I will never trust Sean McVay. That dude, there's some coaches that tell you exactly what they mean. And there's some coaches that are going to hide everything. And they're going to tell you whatever they feel like telling you. And they're going to do whatever they do. They're going to bluff like a lot. He bluffs a lot. So when it comes to coach speak, like we talk, oh, never trust coach speak or always trust coach speak. No. Trust coach speak from the coaches that have shown you over time that you can trust them. And don't trust it from coaches that show you that you can't. Sean McVay has shown us time after time that we cannot trust what he says to the media. So I don't, whatever he says, whatever. I don't take it. I take it with a grain of salt. Now, Carroll, before this season, said we are going to use Chris Carson more in the passing game. We would like to see him get like 50 catches on the season, right? Which isn't an absurd number, right? When you think about it, you think, oh, 50 catches, that's a lot of catches. It's really not that many catches when you look at it in the broad sense of how many catches 50 is over the course of a season. It's like 3.5 a week. 40 to 50 catches is what they said they were looking for from him. He's got 36 with 2 games to go. He gets 3.5 a week. That's 43 catches. I'm good with that. Right? So it turns out that they did utilize him more in the passing game, which is what they said that they were going to do. So again, trust the coaches that have shown you that you can trust them. Don't trust the coaches that don't. You can tell if he's telling the truth by the way he chews his gum. He's always just gnashing that stuff. Jamin CMC or Mike Thomas in cash? I think the answer is yes, without designating one or the other. I feel like your cash game lineup should at least have one. You know, I really think that your cash game lineup should have at least one. What's the secret formula to winning all the money? Have more points than everyone else in the tournament. That works every time. If the highest score in a tournament is 225 and you score 225.5, you win all the money. 100% of the time. Just print money. Who sees an uptick this weekend for Tampa Bay besides Perriman? Is it Watson? I think Watson sees a lot more snaps, and I think the tight ends are going to see a bigger boost than they've seen all season. New to the stream, how do you build your cash compared to GPP? I look more for floor in cash. GPP, I want a floor ceiling combo in cash, and I want a ceiling only in GPP. I want an opportunity, a reasonable opportunity for a ceiling in GPP, and I'm way less concerned with floor than I am in cash. Cash, I want volume and I want a ton of it. I want the ball in my players' hands because it's much easier to score when they have the ball a lot than less. So I'm less likely to take a chance in cash on a 4-target guy or somebody who projects to get around 4 targets than I am willing to pay for somebody who's going to get 7+ targets. I want 70 carries out of my 3 running backs in cash. Am I going to fade Hyman? I don't know. I haven't decided yet on my Saturday lineups. Is McLaurin a cash game play? I like McLaurin a lot, but my issue with McLaurin isn't McLaurin. He's not the issue. The issue is his quarterback, right? Now, the Giants have been terrible, and there's some puzzle piece parts here that fit together. The Giants have given up a ton of deep balls, and McLaurin is very good at converting or being a deep ball receiver. The problem is the efficiency of his quarterback. If Haskins can have a good day, he should have a good day. But I still think that Terry McLaurin, based on where his price is at 6,200 and the volume that he's received, right? Only 16 targets over the last 3 weeks. There's guys at 6,200 who you could project for 8+ targets. And I don't think that you can realistically project Terry McLaurin for 8+ targets, considering that he's gotten that once since week 3. Right? This is a run first, run heavy team. Now, I do think he can score a touchdown. I love his usage in the red zone. Absolutely in love with his usage inside the end zone and his big playability. I think he's a fantastic tournament play, but I think you can do better in cash. Who do I foresee as the highest owned QB on Saturday? Probably Watson, but I don't really concern myself with ownership of quarterbacks. I worried about using Zeke and receivers this week with Dak's shoulder injury. It resigns Dak to a tournament only play, and it takes his quarterback or his wide receivers out of tournament play. I am less concerned with Zeke because Zeke should be the one getting all the usage, right? If Dak can't really fire it 35+ times and can't challenge downfield as much, narrative wise, we would anecdotally say, well, the safeties are all going to come up and they're going to put 9 players in the box and Zeke's not going to have any lanes to run through and this offense is going to suck. And yeah, that's a possibility, but like Rams could have done that last week too. They weren't throwing the ball and they weren't throwing it deep at all. And Zeke got 27 touches. I think that it's much more likely that Zeke sees 22 to 30 touches again this week against Philadelphia. And then, yes, I know that Philadelphia is a tough front, but he had 28 touches against them last time and had 29.7 DraftKings points in week 7. There's no guarantees, right? But volume is going to be there with Zeke. And if that offensive line can block for him, and if Dak can do just enough, right? If he can do just enough, then this could be a spot where Dak becomes a play in those wide receivers, in my opinion, because the ownership is going to come down because of the injury for all the reasons that everybody's worried about. I worry less in tournaments, right? I really do. We talked about this before when Salvadorian Kid asked about what's the differences that I look at in building a GPP lineup than cash. GPP lineups, I'm thinking about ownership. GPP lineups, I'm thinking about leverage. GPP lineups, I'm thinking about possibilities to have the sort of game that I need to put me in a position to win from that player versus the percent owned number, right? And if you're telling me that this offense, which is very, very talented and has guys like Cooper and Gallup and Cobb on the outside, and Dak, who's been limited in every practice this week, there is a distinct possibility that Dak does nothing. He just physically cannot throw. I'm telling you right now, that's on the table of a realistic possibility that he just cannot do it. There's also a possibility that on Sunday we're overplaying the injury. And maybe he can't fire it 60 yards downfield, but he could throw it 20. And if they customize the offense in such a way that allows him to get the ball into the playmakers' hands, and those playmakers can then do something after the catch, it's not out of the realm of possibility that he has 280 yards with 2 or 3 touchdowns on short passes because they get a lot of yards after the catch. And when you consider the ownership coming way down on him and all those pass catchers, it makes for a very good tournament play while the ownership comes down. There's a lot of things anecdotally that we can say to reason and rationalize, and that's what I'm kind of telling you have to do in tournaments. You look at the projections, you take in all the information, and then you work on stuff, on building your lineups around everything else that you see that's out there, right? And that has to include ownership of not only one player, but the combination of the players that you're using. But if I'm stacking that game, I'm probably going to focus more on Wentz to his pass catchers and bring it back with somebody like Zeke or one of the pass catchers. Is Jason Garrett going to get fired if they lose to the Eagle? Do I just throw my cash lineup in single entry GPP or make pivots? I usually will pivot. We used to talk about building... I would say I used to build 3 lineups, and the lineups that I would build were a cash game lineup. And my cash game lineup is usually different than most other people's cash game. Like, I don't typically build exactly the optimal. It's usually different in one spot or 2 spots anyway. Not because I consciously try to do that. It's not like I'm like, oh, what's the optimal? Let me tweak it. It's just the way that my brain works, and I've been successful over the years, and it's hard for me. I'm an old dog. It's hard for me to learn new tricks, even though I have tried to evolve as a player over the last 6 to 8 years in playing this game, and I've successfully done that over the time, but like it becomes a little bit more difficult as time goes on. So yes, I do enter my cash game lineup in like 3 max games, but not really single entry games. Then we built what's called a leagues lineup, which is typically meant for triple ups, quintuple ups, 10-man leagues, things like that, 100-man leagues, which is essentially a cash game build, but optimized a little bit more for tournaments. So a cash game build maybe with a little bit more correlation, where we make sure that we have a quarterback in one or maybe more of his pass catchers, and definitely have a bring back player from that. So it's basically a cash game build, but with a little bit of a tournament field, but not a full-on tournament lineup where I'm worried about ownership of these players. And then I build a full-on ownership tournament lineup by itself. So if you can use that as a lineup building exercise for yourself, build what you feel is the optimal cash game lineup, then build a little bit of a pivot off of it to get a little bit off of the chalk for your smaller leagues, the smaller field stuff or single entry stuff, larger field single entry stuff, and then build a full-on tournament lineup, which is like, okay, if everybody's looking for value at running back, we're going to pay up at running back. If everybody's looking for value at wide receiver, we're just going to pay up at wide receiver, and build yourself a very, very solid lineup with very good plays, but it's going to be different from other players. You're not trying to get completely off the charts, right? So like, we've talked about this numerous times this year, right? So let's say, for the sake of argument, okay, just for the sake of argument, Joe Mixon, he was spotted warming up for day's practice. He's had a calf injury all week. Let's say, I don't think this is going to happen, but I'm just saying. Let's say that Joe Mixon is out, okay? And guys, Joe Mixon is not out. but allow me this conversation. So let's pretend that Joe Mixon's out this week. We already have Jacobs out this week. Okay? So Washington is going to be the guy. Everybody's going to have Washington. Let's say that Joe Mixon's out and Gio Bernard becomes also the guy. Everybody's going to have that. A lot of people are going to have that on top, right? 18K, 3 running backs, all of them getting volume, no paths to any problems, right? Great matchup against Miami for Gio. McCaffrey matchup doesn't matter as much for him. It's just he's going to get his 20 to 30 touches every single week. And Dwayne Washington, we saw what he did the one week that he was the guy. So if this is going to be the standard build that most people are going to go with, very high ownership, always around 15 to 30% ownership, right? You know how you build a contrarian lineup if this is the standard build? Because if this is the standard build, people are also going to probably have this, right? Or they're going to have this, or they're going to have this against Arizona, right? So the way to get off of that in tournaments, and it's not hard to get off of that in tournaments, is there, right? Do that and then, pay up at tight end. There. Now you can't do the other thing, right? So already you've made your lineup look different, right? Because you're doing different things. Or if you don't want to do that, don't pay for those 2 running backs that are down there. Go here. Find mid-level running backs that you can pay for, right? All of a sudden you've differentiated your lineup. And I guarantee you, no matter what projection set you're using, I guarantee you, no matter what optimizer you use, whether it's Daily Roto or any of the other in this industry, these are going to be solid plays in your lineup builder. Even if Gio's a play, if Mixon's out, even with Washington in, and even with CMC being CMC, this is going to differentiate your lineups because these 3 cats are going to be at lower ownership than the other ones, right? There's just no super high dollar running backs to play for this week. Like, you want to pay for Carson? Paying for Carson is an easy way to get contrarian. It's a very easy way to get contrarian because people aren't going to pay $8,500 for Carson, even against Arizona, right? That's the other way to be contrarian. That's more the leverage play, right? So with everybody going with, I think that a lot of ownership this week is going to be on Russ Wilson stacks, whether they're with Lockett, Metcalf, or Hollister, or any combination of that 3, right? Like I think you're going to see a lot of this and probably a lot of this with Russ. Double stacks with Russ, Metcalf, Hollister, which means people aren't going to do that. You want to build a contrarian lineup? Start there. Don't play the pass catchers. Because what if they fall down on the 1 with as many end zone targets as those wide receivers have, right? And DK Metcalf has the most end zone targets in the league. And I think Lockett is like 3rd or 4th in the league in terms of end zone targets. Instead of those being caught, what if they're a flag? What if they're PI? Now they get the ball in the 1 and Chris Carson has 2 or 3 touchdowns. Is that a possibility of something that could happen? You know that they're going to get him the ball 20 plus times because that's just what they do, right? So being contrarian is as simple as find what everybody's going to do and literally just do something different, right? I'm not saying, to be contrarian, you know what I'm going to do to be contrarian? I'm going to play CJ Procise as my RB1. You're overthinking it at that point, right? It's too much, right? You're going too far. I don't think that you need to go that far to be contrarian. It's very possible to be contrarian without being stupid. Thoughts on Boston Scott as a pivot from Washington for GPP? He had actually pretty good usage last week. More than I thought that he'd get. Right? What did he have? 13 touches, caught 7 of 7 targets, got 6 carries on the ground. I think that that's about where he is. So essentially, you're looking at Boston Scott as though he is a poor man's James White, right? You're looking at him like possibly a really, really small Austin Eckler, because he's legit like 5'5", 5'6". He's small. But he's fast and he's shifty, you know. You're not going to get any inside the 5 carries. He's going to have to score from outside the 15-yard line. You know, Scott seems similar to Sanders. Not really. I mean, they're both athletic and you know, and quick, but they're completely they're different type of guys. They're different size. They're different type of players. Like if Boston Scott is the only guy, there's no way. I don't think that you can give Boston Scott the ball 20 plus. Boston Scott is Tariq Cohen. Think about him that way. So if you're okay playing Tariq Cohen, if you think that he's going to get 10 to 13 touches and you think that he's a good play, go for it. But that's kind of what he is. He's a Tariq Cohen-ish player. If Edelman is really banged up, you love White on Saturday. Good call. Don't mind that at all. I mean, it's always fine to do the different thing. I mean, people overthink stuff all the time. It's hard to get out of doing that. And I've always said it, like I joke about it, and I think that people take it the wrong way when I say that. It's like I'm not smart enough to like fade the good plays. And like I'm not. Right? I've made a ton of money playing the right plays for a lot of years. So like I tend to play the right plays. You know, the quote right plays. It's become way more about the combinations because I don't play cash at this point in the season. Cash games have become way too efficient for a multitude of reasons, and I can talk about that on stream off of video because it's a boring video conversation, at least for the purpose of this video, which is not the place for that conversation. So like for me, it's more about tournaments, and I feel like for the last 4 or 5 weeks, I feel like I've had tournaments surrounded. Which, when I say that, I understand that that's confusing, and chat knows, and people that have been in Discord know that like I've been really close to winning tournaments the last 3, 4, 5 weeks. I've had multiple top 10s, but nothing that's really a breakthrough. So you're talking about like 120-yard gain being the difference between finishing 9th or 8th and finishing 2nd or 1st. So I feel like I've had it surrounded, but I haven't had the breakthrough. So we'll see how it goes week 16, 17, and through the playoffs. Cash games are a grind. Cash games are a grind, but people have gotten much, much better. And with the rake increases and everything else, it's made beating cash games way too difficult. At least for the grind. Like everything's a cost benefit analysis, right? Like they're still beatable, but they don't sell as much. So you have to play 50-50s and double ups and triple ups and things like that, as opposed to just being able to sell head-to-head action. And you can't sell enough head-to-head action to get enough good games. But again, that's a conversation for another thing. Conversation for another video. Max DFS says Bengals just confirmed Mixon is playing on Sunday. Okay, good. I mean, I like Mixon this week with as much volume as I've said this since the first video of the week. I want running backs against Miami that get volume. Mixon has been a running back who, for a long time now, the whole second half of the season, even the first half of the season, his volume was good, right? He was getting 19, 17 touches, all that sort of stuff. But the second half of the season, since week 8 against the Rams, 21 touches, 32 touches, 16 here, 18 here. Whether they're winning or losing, they're just pounding the rock with him. 23, 27, 28. Mixon is getting a bunch of volume. And if you can get that volume consistently every single week, and you have a matchup with the Dolphins, if he gets 25 touches in this game, he's going to have a minimum of 17 DraftKings points. If he gets 25 touches. That's what we're going to have to figure out. Right? And it comes down to the same thing we talk about all the time. Is this a pain management injury or is this a structural injury? Because if it's a muscle thing, right? If it's structural, drugs don't help. But if it's not structural and it's pain management, then they will give him all of the best drugs that the NFL can find, and he will be able to play pain-free on Sunday. I'm hoping that Stefania will give us an answer. When she does, I'll trust her because she's as good as there is in the industry. You know, I worry about structural injuries, right? I don't worry about pain. If they, as soon as they say, well, it's a pain management issue, he's fine. It's a pain management issue, he's going to play. And he's not going to feel pain because they're going to make it so that he does not feel pain. Still on Mac this week? Yes, but tournament only. Because there's a definite risk, you know, that they've been going away from him a little bit, you know, in the last few weeks, even against teams like Jacksonville. But with 2 games on the road against New Orleans and Tampa Bay, who's been very good at stopping the run, and New Orleans, who they throttled them, they were up 34-0. That's a horrible Mac script, right? That's a bad game script for Marlon Mack. Right? Marlon Mack is not Leonard Fournette. Marlon Mack is not Christian McCaffrey. Marlon Mack is not Le'Veon Bell. He is not a running back who, if they get down, is just going to get more catches. Right? Even Ezekiel Elliott, if they get down, they're not gonna pull Zeke and put in Pollard so that they can throw the ball. They're just gonna keep Zeke in and throw him the ball. And it used to be that with Gurley too, but it's not anymore. If they get down, Mack's off the field. So, assuming that they are a 6-point favorite, and they are playing at home, and back-tested forever data shows us that home favored running backs exceed their fantasy expectation the vast majority of the time, way more than road favored running backs, more than anything else. He does have a great offensive line, and Carolina has been horrible against opposing running backs in terms of carries, yards, efficiency, yards before contact, yards after contact, all of those things. I think Marlon Mack has a great ceiling opportunity this week, but there are floor risks, I think would be the right way to say it, right? He could have a 6-point fantasy day. He could have an 8-point fantasy day. Or he could have a 26 or a 28-point fantasy day. And I don't see many. I think that's where the bulk of the projectable outcomes fall, as opposed to like Mixon, who projects mostly in that 14 to 22 point range, right? So high floor, still an access to a ceiling, but the bulk of the meat of that bell curve is in the middle of the outcomes. Marlon Mack's outcomes look like they're either winning you a tournament or poop. It's one or the other. Right? But he's a very good running back behind a very good offensive line against a team that does not defend the run well at all for the last 8 weeks. And he's at home and favored. There's a lot of good things pointing his way. And with Greer, the Colts could feast defensively. Yes, but let's not act like Kyle Allen's been good. That's the thing. Okay? This is the conversation that I don't think people have had. We talk about, well, it's Greer and they making a change because they want to see what they have, and I'm all for that. Find out what you have. But it's not like Kyle Allen's been good. 3 interceptions, no fumbles lost. 2 interceptions, 1 fumble lost. 1 interception, 1 fumble lost. Against New Orleans, he didn't turn the ball over. Hallelujah. 4 interceptions, 2 turnovers, 1 turnover, 3 turnovers. He's been bad. He's been legit bad. Right? Loss. If you give the other team the ball a lot, 1, you're not scoring, and 2, the other team has the ball and usually in favorable territory. So if Greer is basically Kyle Allen. And with as bad as Kyle Allen's been, Christian McCaffrey and DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel have all been fine. And Ian Thomas had 1 out of 2 games where he was great. So it's not like that the quarterback play, right, has held down guys like Christian McCaffrey, right? He's been fine through all the horrible quarterback play. It's not like DJ Moore has been bad. He's been fine through all of the horrible quarterback play. Curtis Samuel has been more up and down, agree, right? But 7 touchdowns on the year with horrible quarterback play. The tight ends, Ian Thomas, last week, didn't do much, right? Bad quarterback play, didn't have the ball that much. The week before, 10 targets, 16.5 points with Greg Olsen out. Greg Olsen back now. Greg Olsen's been fine, right? 25, 20, 17, 10. He's had a lot of good games this year. That offense, fantasy-wise, has been doing fine. But the quarterback play, let's not pretend that it's been good. It's been horrible, right? But running backs have been who's really feasted against this Carolina defense. And part of that is because they're playing from ahead. Part of that is because they've got good... they're giving up a ton of touchdowns. Part of that is because the opposing teams are leading and giving the ball more to the running back in the second half because Kyle Allen's turning the hell over all the time. But it's also good for Carolina's players because he is turning it over and they are playing from behind. So he has to throw it more, which means they're piling up more targets and catches constantly. Greer can't be that much better. I'm not saying that he's like a Hall of Famer. I'm saying, what if they're the same? Right? What if they're equally average or below average? Right? It's not like Allen was this, like, think about it in terms of Madden rating. Let's just make up a Madden rating based on the outcomes. Let's say that Allen is like a 62 quarterback. Greer is not going to be a 20. What if Greer's like 60? Right? And we've seen what they can pile up offensively with bad quarterback play. So I'm not worried about CMC this week because of the change in quarterbacks. To me, the offense is still the offense. And if you want to play the Colts D, I get it. Right? We've been playing defenses against Kyle Allen all the time. Let's just play good players and call it there. I mean, quarterback's a different animal. Because I'm not saying that you have to play Kyle Allen in cash. I'm saying you can if you'd like. Merry Christmas, Dan. It's hard to be worse than Allen. Right. Quarterback's a different animal. Any sub 6K value wide receiver plays? Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot every week. Every single week, there's sub 6K plays at wide receiver. Like 6K gives me a lot of room. You know, 6K, DK Metcalf's less than 6K. Christian Kirk's been less than 6K. People are going to play Tyler Boyd because he's playing Miami. Slayton's been good and good matchup against Washington. Gallup, if you believe in the arm for Dak, has a fantastic matchup against the Philly DBs. Tournament play every week, Marquise Brown. Right? Never a cash game play, always a tournament play. There's a million under 6K. 6K is easy. You can find dudes that are under 6K. Who believes in Dak? You mean like, are you saying that Dak is bad? Like, are we really making that argument in 2019? I'm talking about the injury to Dak. Like, if you believe that he can throw through this injury. I mean, I did a whole thing on Dak earlier in the show. But like, that's the reason why Dak's a great tournament play this week. Because people are fading him based on how they're reading this shoulder injury. And could be right, could be wrong. I'm saying that there's variance in the public's understanding of football injuries and how they limit or cap players in terms of fantasy value on the weekend. Because is there any path to Dak Prescott scoring 24 DraftKings points this weekend? Because if no, I don't believe you. If you're saying there's a 0% chance, if they played this game a million times, you simulated this game a million times, he does not have 24 DraftKings points one time, I don't believe you. Probably most there. Jet receivers against the Steelers, maybe a fade. I mean, Steelers defense is 100% in play. They're just expensive. They're like 3,900. They're extremely expensive. It's okay. That's the difference. It's not a pain thing, right? With Dak, that's a structural issue. So like something is not working in that AC joint. And so it is a question of whether or not he is able to throw down the field. But like I said, it is a question and not known. Right? Cheap tight end for GPP. Interesting. Let me take a look. So like cheap being defined as what? Like I rarely find anybody at sub 3K, but like Hollister against Arizona at 4,200 is great. Like I said, I rarely go down to that price point, right? I rarely get down because of the way that DraftKings has priced tight ends and quarterbacks this week. It is very, very hard to find a volume tight end at that price point. Cheap to me at tight end this year is kind of 3,500 to 4,000. In that range, you have Jonnu, right? In that range, you have Noah Fant, if he plays. You have Greg Olsen. Those are probably the three best in that range. If you want lower, you're taking a chance on somebody like Caden Smith, right? There just isn't anything down here. You know, there just isn't. They've priced guys out of this range. The only time we found somebody in that range was Ian Thomas the first week that Greg Olsen was out and he got 10 targets, right? And that was admittedly by DraftKings a mistake that they did not price the backup up a little bit more, with Greg Olsen having been on the injury report the week before and or leaving that game early, and Washington having 4 targets after he left. So, you know, you're not finding the value that we found in previous years at that position that cheap. That's going to do it for this week. I appreciate you guys showing up. Thank you for clicking. Once again, I wish you the best. There is a couple of videos up already for the Saturday slate, the Saturday showdown, and the Sunday slate. Go check those out if you haven't already. Come help me get to 10,000 followers on Twitch. That link is down below. Until that next video, I'll see you guys in the Anti-Tinkercast 45 minutes before kickoff on Sunday. Bye.
He's a legend.